All right, back from the test drive, and went really well. Very few bugs to work out so far. Of course, Elin's now going to drive it for the next few weeks here and there, just to make sure everything is good before we head down to the trials. But good drive home from my place to here, and Elin had it up to a pretty good speed. There's the celebratory beer. All right, guys, welcome back to the Rusty Beauties shop. I'm Tush, Elin's over there, and this is the 62 Triumph TR4 that we've been working on. And Elin's been driving for the last little while. He's probably put about, I don't know, a couple hundred miles on it. Yeah. And is sort of working through the bugs. And we have one major bug to contend with that seems to be getting worse over time. I just actually took it for a little test drive with Elin, and it's acting up worse than ever. So not an easy problem to deal with, but it's one that we're looking to attack head on at least. And that is, we're having a transmission issue with it shifting. Originally, it would shift up through the gears okay, and then coming back down. Well, originally it shifted fine on our first initial test drives. Yeah. We could go up and down the gears as we wanted to. Then it's sort of the next phase of it, it would actually shift up through the gears, but coming back through the gears down to second from either fourth or third, it didn't want to go back into second. So that was the first iteration. Now, after test driving it today, it doesn't even want to go from first to second. So, and then up through the gears, and I can't go back from third to second. So that's going to be a major problem. So now we're looking at ways to resolve that and putting our heads together. We've got some spares, and we're thinking that we're going to try to get it fixed, obviously. But we're just trying to think the right course of action to do that. All right, so it's always good to have options. So we have a few options to consider. And the first option, I had to write these down as I was kind of thinking through them. So the first option was to go and grab the transmission out of my 59 Triumph TR3A. That's kind of mid-restoration. And then obviously pull this one out and swap that one back in here. And that would be basically swap for swap, because it's a TR3A transmission that's in here with an A-type overdrive. So that would have been, doable. Second was to try to adapt the A-type transmission or the A-type overdrive from the current transmission that's in the car into this transmission over here, which is from Elin's 57 Triumph TR3. So that was option 2. Option 3 was to swap back to a TR4 non-overdrive transmission that came with this car. It was actually installed with this car. And that's sitting over here on the floor. And then the fourth option was to install a new main shaft, so a new overdrive main shaft in this TR4 transmission, and then adapt the A-type that we have on the TR3 transmission in the TR4. This is very confusing. And do that swap. So Elin looks like we're just trying to do a bit of research on main shafts. And it looks like Elin probably has a main shaft that will work, which is a shorter shaft for the TR4. Here it is here. You can just see a quick comparison of the main shaft. So overdrive main shaft on the right and non-overdrive on the left. You can see the difference in the length. So I'm thinking that's what we're probably going to do as our first option, is to do the transmission, the TR4 transmission, which will give us a full synchro transmission. So that will be better than what's currently in the car. Again, this transmission is in a bit of an unknown condition. So that's a little bit scary. But again, all of the other scenarios that I've just gone through are also unknown condition as well. We did think about possibility of doing a fifth option, which would be putting a TR6 transmission in. Here's the one out of my 70 PI TR6, but that would be new clutch. I'm not sure if it actually needs a new flywheel as well, so I think we're discounting that option at the moment. Anyway, we're fighting our way through it, so that's going to entail lots of disassembly in order to get the old transmission out. But regardless, we were going to have to take it apart to try to fix it anyway. We thought originally it might be a top cover issue, maybe with the linkages binding, or maybe one of the switches in the top cover binding, but it seems to be more than that. So it does seem to switch through the gears with the car off, which leads me to think that it's more of a internal to the transmission issue than it is just with the linkages. So anyway, that's where we're at. So we're going to tear this thing apart and see what we can do. We have basically a week. It's a week and a couple of days. It's Friday now. British Car Day is next weekend on the Sunday. And then 3 days after that, we leave for the trials. So we've got a little bit of time to tinker around with this, but we want to be able to obviously test it as well. So we're going to get crack-a-lackin'.
Let's get crack-a-lackin'.
×2. One more thing before we actually get into the video. So here is the list of items that came up during the break-in or the test driving. So passenger side rear shock. We initially thought it had a leak and it seemed to have gone away, but now it's back. So I believe I have a spare rear shock to install. The bonnet latch, we mentioned that the bonnet was popping up by itself, so we need to have a look at that. We want to put the thermostat back in as the car is running a little bit colder than we want, and it's obviously going to get cooler in the fall, so we definitely want to run a thermostat. We were having an issue when we were getting the car safetied with the horn ground, and sometimes the horn would beep and sometimes it wouldn't, and we figured out that it was that lower universal joint that we replaced. Remember, it used to be a rubber coupler and we switched to a metal U-joint that's used like on the TR6. And that joint on the bottom is not conducting a good ground, so we're going to add a ground strap to that bottom U-joint down there. Elin wants to hide the speaker wire a little bit better. We wanted to do a compression check and possibly hook it up to Dr. Octopus, the snap-on box over there, so that's possible. We need to do a carb mixture adjustment. Elin's done a couple of plug cuts, and it looks like we're still running a little bit rich, so we want to lean those out a little bit. The motor mounts are a little bit suspect. They did pass safety, but I don't particularly like the look of them, so we ordered some new motor mounts, and they've come in, so we're going to get those installed. And if we have time, the door escutcheons are looking a little worse for wear on here, so while I was ordering the motor mounts, I ordered some escutcheons for the doors. So that is the list. So anyway, before we do any of that, this is our main focus. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually crack open the TR4 transmission here. So again, this came out of the car. It wasn't original to the car because this originally came with an overdrive unit. Keith, the previous owner, had swapped the transmission out. Now, I'm assuming that we're going to assume that this transmission is in good shape because Keith, if you recall that the first part of this series, Keith had installed everything new in this, including a new clutch, new cross shaft, new throwout bearing, new basically everything. So we're thinking that Keith thought this was a good transmission, so we're going to assume the same. But before we go very far, we're going to actually pull the cover off and take a look inside and see if anything looks untoward. All right, the top cover is off, and we're just having a look at the gears, see if we can see anything chipped. I don't think I see anything on first glance, but again, it's going to be a bit of an unknown. Oh, it's got oil in it still.
Yeah. Not much.
Okay. I don't see anything chipped or broken, but that's about all we can do from a visual perspective.
Well, we have to take it apart to change the shaft. So we're gonna inspect bushings. We're gonna inspect the end play of the synchros. This one looks like already it's tight.
All right, we're going to continue on then, and we'll bring you back when there's something to show. All right, we've got the case gutted, and all the clusters are out. So I just cleaned the case out a little bit. So Lynn's going through and having a look at the gears, and guess we'll do obviously some measurements as well, and we'll go from there. Let's see. We have some stuff to exchange if required, but obviously everything needs to be measured first before we make that decision. So making progress. All right, so we have the non-overdrive main shaft and the overdrive main shaft side by side. Just for comparison, we weren't exactly 100% sure this would work, but we were about 95% sure.
100% now.
Well, 100% now we are, but before we compared them, we still had some doubts, but it looks good. Yeah.
Because the TR3 transmission, the one with non-synchro, has a different spline here because of the non-synchro hub.
Right.
So I wasn't sure what kind of a shaft was in this transmission, but it looks like it is the exact correct one. So what's next, we should just check the synchro style, make sure that they're still good. If not, we have some replacements. We're gonna check the bushings, the protrusion on each gear. The top hat bushing is the one that is that is usually
cracked or separated.
Yeah, this one looks good.
Yep.
Still in one piece. So if everything measures good, we're just gonna install everything on this shaft and put it back together.
Okie dokie. All right, so the first thing that Elin did was he went through and we checked all the synchros, and we actually exchanged all of them with some we had available. So we've got all brand new or new to us synchros in the gearbox. So that's a good thing. Now we're measuring the protrusion of this bushing on the gear. So we're just figuring out how to do that. Gonna reference some crazy guy on the internet named Elin, who does videos on the Rusty Beauties channel. Okay, so we've done all of our checks and everything is to spec, and we're ready to reassemble. So Elin's got everything sort of lined out here as we need it. And I've got the case cleaned out, so we'll go ahead and we'll assemble this, and then we'll come back when we get ready to do the overdrive install. All right, while Elin's doing the assembly on the transmission, I'm actually doing the disassemble of the interior just to get a little bit of a head start. So seats are out, mats are out. Now we're gonna go after the center console, or the H-frame, and the transmission tunnel. So we're in the process of doing that. Hate going backwards, but it is what it is. All right, welcome back. It's Saturday morning. We worked on the transmission switchover, I guess you can call it. Somewhat of a rebuild, I guess you can call it. And we had a few issues last night, mostly with one of the needle bearings, actually. We ended up luckily having a spare. So here is what I'm talking about. The one at the rear here, we were having some issues with. This one's not the greatest, but we did have another one of this. But the other one had sort of completely come apart. So fortunately, we were able to put the new one in, and we've got everything spinning smoothly. So we're going to continue on this morning. Elin thinks we're going to be driving by 10:30, I think he said, and it's 8 o'clock in the morning. So I think he's a little bit overly optimistic. We didn't get the transmission cover off yet. There's one bolt holding it on. We're going to get the car up in the air so we can get to that from the underside. But we made pretty good progress getting to where we need to be to get the old transmission out. So the one good thing about pulling the trans out, it should make it a little bit easier for us to change the motor mounts while the transmission is out, as we'll have a little bit more flex in the engine. So we'll do that while the transmission is out. There's a couple of, we're kind of trying to talk ourselves into this as a good thing. There was one stripped bolt on the case of the old transmission. Now we're going to have a nice fresh threaded section here on the top cover, so we should be good there. And we're trying to look at the positives. Obviously, we're going to have a first gear synchro. That's going to be a big positive. We hope, anyway. I mean, got it brand new pretty much in there now. So anyway, let's get crack-a-lackin'. There's nothing like getting a good morning workout. So the transmission is out, or almost out, just resting on, we found a good use for a yoga mat. So the trans is just sitting here on the passenger side, and we're just cleaning up the bench over there, and we'll bring this over, and we're going to steal the top cover, obviously the overdrive, and everything we need from this transmission, including the cross fork and everything we actually transferred from that transmission to this one is going to actually be transferred back. So we're going to take a bit of a break, take a bit of a breather, maybe have a cup of coffee, and then do the transition. All right, I don't know if you can really hear me very well over the compressor noise, but we're having a little bit of an issue with the adapter plate for the overdrive because the shaft fixing is different for the TR4 trans here. It's got this plate that's bolted between the two shafts, but on the TR3, it doesn't have that. It's got singular bolts holding in the shaft, so we're having to make a little trench for this plate. So that's what we're trying to do now, just with a little bit. We're gonna get the drill out as well and see what we can do. Gotta do what you gotta do. We also figured out that the top cover is different as well for the TR4 versus TR3 because of the non-synchro. So now we're having to get the TR4 top cover, and eventually we're gonna have to drill and tap the TR4 cover for all the switches because there are no switches currently in the top of the TR4 cover. So it's turning into a bigger project than we imagined. So there's the difference in the TR3 case versus the TR4 case. There's no screw hole here to hold these two shafts in. So, and there's a lock plate on the TR4. So we have to make a provision in the TR4 backing plate for that reason. All right, here's the end result of Elin's milling shop, and fits well now. So I'm going to clean up this old gasket material, and we'll get ready to reinstall this. So let me clean this up, and we'll be ready to move forward. All right, it's Sunday, and not much has changed probably since yesterday. I think that's probably the same kind of view as we had yesterday. We spent a few hours in the morning on it yesterday before we had to do other things, and we were having issues getting the overdrive mated up to the rear of the transmission. I think we're having some issues with the splines on the output shaft, having a few burrs. So we're just going to try to smooth those out to see if we can get this to slide on. We've been trying to slide it on without any springs to make sure it slides up nicely. And we're not even able to do that. So we're obviously worried when we put the springs on and you have spring tension that it's going to be even more difficult. So we want to get this mated up properly before we go to the next step of adding the springs in and then screwing it down or bolting it down. So that's what we're up to. So hopefully we can get this done fairly quickly so we can move on to getting this back in the car and Elin to test driving at 10:30. It's 10 o'clock today already. So, all right, we're going to get crack-a-lacking. Okay, we came up with the idea of checking the splines on the output. Elin's got a couple of old Planet gears here, and we're just checking to see where the problem is on the splines. We have a little bit of a burr or a little bit of a mushroom on the end of one of the splines, which is preventing that from going in easily. We've checked it against the old transmission. We can get it on there. So we're going to basically use this as kind of a template to file this down well enough so we can actually get this to slide on easily. All right, been an hour and a half or so, and transmission is mated back up to the overdrive, so we've got that in successfully. Just swapping out all of the cross shaft, throw bearing, etc. for the front here. So that's done. The next thing we need to do then is to modify the top cover to accept another switch because it's short one switch. So we're gonna have to drill and tap the cover before we can put the cover back on. Got our 30 weight non-detergent standing by, and we're gonna use that before we put it back in the car. So making progress. All right, now time to drill and tap some holes in the top cover of the TR4 shifter to accept the switches that we have here. So apparently it's a 16 mil tap, 14 mil drill. So we've got to do these 3 bosses here for the switches. So that's what we're up to now. Everything else is back in the trans as far as the operating mechanism, throwout bearing, etc. We ended up changing the snout out because the snout that was on this box was a little bit grabby, let's say. I did try to sand it down and polish it a little bit, but the snout that was on the TR3 box was a little bit smoother, so we ended up exchanging that out. We had a new seal in that anyway, so it worked out okay. Just had to take it apart and put it back together again a couple of times. All right, drill and tap time. All right, transmission is back in place and just bolted up really, really loosely. We thought it'd be a good opportunity now to go after the motor mounts. So here those are here. So apparently I know there's a couple of different styles on the TR4 for motor mounts. I believe there's a round style, which I think this car technically should have. But right now it's got these rectangular mounts installed. I think there's one other type, maybe for the 4A, that's a little bit different than that. So we're in the process of getting the mounts changed out while we have the transmission loosely bolted up. We should be able to tilt the engine from side to side a little bit easier. Elin is telling me that these mounts are pretty hard to get to, specifically on the driver's side. Not a lot of room to maneuver down there, so I hear lots of swearing. I figured we'd film this. So that motor mount is very, very tight and hard to get at, and the nut on the bottom of the mount is extremely tight. So much so that we're having trouble actually turning a wrench from underneath the car. So Elin's got me pulling on a ratchet strap while he's holding the wrench on the nut, and it's actually working. So if you're having an issue getting that motor mount off, I'm pretty sure that must be the original mount. So here's what we're doing. I wish I could actually film it, but the ratchet strap's attached to the end of the wrench down there, and I'm just pulling up on it. So that's the way we're getting this off, hopefully. All right, pretty much back together. We now have the thermostat installed, or partially installed. We're just working on finishing that up. Here are the motor mounts, by the way, just so you can have a look at why we wanted to change, particularly the passenger side. So it was basically in 2 pieces. So we knew this one was on its way out, and getting it out, it basically disintegrated. So the only other problem that we have now is we actually put a small leak in one of our heater hoses over there. When we sort of crunched it on the corner of our plastic box, we've sort of punctured a hole in the lower hose. So we're gonna have to shorten that and reclamp that before we go on a test drive. I've got a few things like the radiator fixing here to redo up, because we had to basically pull the radiator forward in order to get the thermostat in. So we'll get that fixed up. But we do have the trans back in and bolted up along with the drive shaft. So if things are good to go there, we're just gonna wire it up. And Elin's gonna take it for a test drive before we fully put the cover back on. We wanna make sure it's operating as it should before we bundle it back up again. So making progress, but it is getting a little bit later, 6:51 p.m. And we probably have an hour or two to get to the point of a test drive. Yeah, 7:35 Sunday night.
So we're only 36 hours late than our original plan.
Yeah, we were planning on test driving it Friday night, wasn't it?
No, Saturday morning.
Saturday morning? Oh. All right, so everything's back together, except obviously the interior, because we're gonna go test drive it to make sure the trans works. We've just done a quick test on stands to make sure the solenoid is clicking for the overdrive, and it is when it should be. So that's a good thing. So we'll let you know how the test drive goes after Elin takes it out for a rip. So the plan is now, if all goes well with the test drive, we'll button up the interior tomorrow in the next couple days. And then, of course, Elin's going to have to do a bit more test driving before he takes it on a trip on the weekend to British Car Day on Sunday. So we're hoping this works because we don't have much time left on the agenda. Wish us luck. Okay, it rolls. That's good. Good start. Getting dark pretty early out here now. I did a little bit of an adjustment to the mixture as well, so. All right, let's see how he does. What?
Second, now shifted to second.
Okay, good. And first at speed? Good. Nice. All right, now Monday afternoon, and as you can see, we've got everything back together. So I think the last video segment I took was Elin taking the car for a rip last night and checking to make sure everything worked as far as the gearbox was concerned. Everything worked perfectly, including our all-synchro gearbox now, and overdrive still operating as it should. We've gone through our list here, and we've pretty much checked everything else off that needed to be checked off, except for our compression check, which we're going to do now. And we're going to throw some new plugs in it. I had NGKs in it. I'm a big, I had Champions in it. We're going to go back with Champions as well. We'll just keep these in the trunk for spares, but we'll get a better, I did an adjustment on the mixture, so we'll start with some fresh plugs and take it for a run and see if we can get some readings from the plugs eventually. So compression check, and then we might, if we have time today, hook it up to Dr. Octopus over there, the snap-on analyzer, and we'll see what we can find out in addition to what we get with the compression test. All right, done the compression test, and there are the compression numbers. We think they're very similar to what they were before. We'll have to go back and check our old video. Now we've got, we're getting the Snap-on Commander 2 hooked up, and we're gonna do a quick analysis and see how it's running. So yeah, crossing things off. All right, we've got the TR4 hooked up to the Snap-on Counselor 2, and I'm not gonna take you through what we're looking at on this particular car, but unless we see something odd, I'll bring you back and show you what we find out. But Elin's done a full Snap-on Counselor 2 session on a 64 TR4. Yeah. So I'll put a link to the channel above up in the corner if you want to have a look at that to see what this machine actually does. All right, just took it for a little run, my first driving it with the all-synchro transmission, and fantastic. Actually, it sounds a little quieter even, that transmission. So anyway, it seems to be running really well. Got lots of power. Elin and I both drove it for a bit. We've got no leaks. We just did a quick spark plug check, and we're going to leave the mixture where it's at for now. We probably didn't go for a long enough drive to really get an accurate tell, but they look okay. I think they look better than they did before. So I think we're good to go as far as British Car Day for next weekend, for the Sunday, and then 3 days following that we'll be on our way to the trials. So hopefully nothing pops up in the next little while. Elin's going to drive it for the rest of the week and into the weekend, so hopefully we'll have a successful week, and we'll take you a little bit of video at the show, and should be a good day. We're looking forward to that. And I think we'll put an end to this video. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for subscribing. And we'll see you on the next video.
Bye.